She collapsed on the kitchen floor. Her daughter dialed a wrong number. It reached the billionaire who abandoned her. The kitchen timer screamed through the apartment at 7:43 p.m., but Anastasia Steele couldn't reach it. Her body had already begun its descent toward the cold linoleum floor, her vision blurring into darkness as her knees buckled. The wooden spoon clattered from her hand, tomato sauce splattering across the cabinet doors like abstract art nobody wanted. Her last coherent thought before everything went black was about the chicken, burning in the oven. Such a mundane worry for someone whose heart was failing. 6-year-old Iris stood frozen in the doorway, her stuffed elephant dangling from one small hand. She'd come to ask if dinner was ready, but now Mommy was on the floor, not moving, not answering when she called her name. The little girl's voice cracked as she repeated Mommy 3 times, each attempt more desperate than the last. The timer kept shrieking, mixing with the smoke detector that had just joined the chaos. Iris's hands shook as she grabbed her mother's phone from the counter. She knew she was supposed to call 911, but her fingers, slippery with tears and panic, hit all the wrong numbers. The phone rang once, twice. A man's voice answered, deep, professional, slightly irritated at being disturbed at this hour. "You've reached Lincoln Gray's private line. Who is this?" The name meant nothing to Iris. She didn't know that 7 years ago, this man had promised her mother forever and then vanished like morning mist. She didn't know about the engagement ring Anastasia had sold to pay for prenatal vitamins, or the wedding dress that still hung in a storage unit across town, tags still attached. All Iris knew was that someone had answered, and she needed help. "My mommy fell down and won't wake up." The words tumbled out between hiccuping sobs. "There's smoke, and the loud beeping won't stop, and I don't know what to do." Lincoln Gray, CEO of Gray Enterprises, billionaire before 35, master of hostile takeovers and corporate warfare, felt his blood turn to ice. That voice, it sounded exactly like Anastasia's had when she was frightened. But that was impossible. This had to be some child who'd randomly dialed his number. Yet something in his chest tightened, a feeling he'd buried under 7 years of board meetings and acquisition deals. "Listen to me very carefully," Lincoln said, his voice shifting into the calm command that had steered companies through the crisis. "What's your name?" "Iris." The phone nearly slipped from his hand. Iris. Anastasia had always loved that name, had picked it out years before she'd even thought about children. They'd been lying in his Manhattan penthouse, planning a future that would never come, and she'd said, "If we have a daughter, I want to name her Iris. Iris, sweetheart, I need you to tell me your address. Can you do that?" Through her tears, the little girl recited the address, a modest apartment. Complex in Queens, 40 minutes from his Wall Street office. Without hesitation, Lincoln pulled up his emergency services app, dispatching an ambulance while keeping the child on the line. "Good girl. Now, can you see an oven in the kitchen?" "Yes. I need you to be very brave and turn the dial all the way to the left. Can you reach it?" He heard small footsteps, a grunt of effort. "I need to climb on the chair. Be careful. Take your time." The scraping of furniture against the floor. Then blessed silence as the timer stopped its assault. The smoke detector continued its warning, but at least one source of chaos had been eliminated. "Excellent job, Iris. Now, is your mummy breathing? Can you see her chest moving up and down?" More footsteps. A pause that stretched like eternity. "I think so. But her eyes won't open." "That's okay. Help is coming. Can you unlock the front door for them?" "I'm not supposed to unlock the door for strangers. These are helpers, sweetheart. Paramedics. They have uniforms and will help your mummy." As he guided the child through unlocking the door, Lincoln was already moving. His driver was pulling up to the building's entrance before his assistant could ask where he was going. In the back seat of his Bentley, Lincoln stayed on the line, telling Iris stories about brave princesses who saved kingdoms, keeping her calm while sirens grew louder in the background. "They're here." Iris's voice pitched high with relief. Lincoln heard the professional voices of paramedics taking over. They're efficient. Movements and medical terminology painting a picture he didn't want to see. Then one of them must have taken the phone. "Sir, we have the situation under control. The patient is stable but unconscious. We're transporting to Mount Sinai, Queens." "I'll be there," Lincoln said, the words escaping before logic could intervene. "Are you family?" He hesitated. What was he? The man who'd walked away when Anastasia told him she couldn't be the trophy wife his world demanded? The coward who'd chosen his family's empire over the only woman who'd ever seen him as more than a bank account with a pulse? "I'm someone who needs to be there." The legal disclaimer appeared on screen as required fictional story. The character named Lincoln Gray in this story is entirely fictional and not based on any real person with the same name. The random wrong number her 6-year-old dialed, it connected to the billionaire who abandoned them. What would you do if the person who broke your heart saved your life? Tonight, a single call reopens a 7-year-old wound and a door that should have stayed closed. The universe doesn't usually give second chances wrapped in emergency calls and childhood innocence, but here we are, watching fate play its strangest hand yet. Stay with me to see if this second chance is redemption or just another repeat of history's cruelest patterns. Because some mistakes can't be fixed with money, and some bridges once burned leave scars that never quite heal. Yet sometimes, just sometimes, a child's desperate call can crack open hearts that have been sealed shut for far too long. Welcome to Mr. Steele Rich Stories. I'm so glad you're here with us today. If you love stories about second chances, redemption, and the kind of love that requires real courage to rebuild, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. Consider this your invitation to join our community. We share heart-gripping romance stories every week, and I promise you'll want to be here for every single one. Welcome to the family. The hospital lights hummed overhead as Anastasia's consciousness swam back to the surface. Her throat felt like sandpaper, her limbs heavy as concrete blocks. The first thing she registered was the antiseptic smell, that distinct hospital cocktail of bleach and despair. The second was the small weight pressed against her side, Iris, curled up on the narrow bed, her stuffed elephant crushed between them, sleeping with her mouth slightly open. The third thing she noticed stopped her heart for the second time that day. Lincoln Gray sat in the visitor's chair, his $1,000 suit wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. In his hands he held a bouquet of daisies, not roses, not orchids, but simple daisies. Her favorite. He'd remembered after all these years. Their eyes met across the sterile room, and the heart monitor beside her bed betrayed her immediately, its steady rhythm spiking into rapid staccato beats. A nurse would probably come check soon, but Anastasia couldn't control her body's reaction to seeing him again. 7 years had added distinguished lines around his eyes, a harder edge to his jaw, but those eyes, dark brown, intense, searching, were exactly the same. "You left when I said I was keeping her." The words came out raw, unfiltered, 7 years of hurt compressed into one accusation. She hadn't meant to start there, but apparently her subconscious had been rehearsing this confrontation since 2017. Lincoln set the daisies on the bedside table with careful precision, as if they were made of glass. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she'd never heard before. "There will never be a day I won't be sorry. Sorry I don't have to pay rent. Sorry don't hold your hair back during morning sickness. Sorry doesn't explain to a 6-year-old why she doesn't have a daddy like the other kids at school." He flinched at each word, absorbing them like physical blows. Good. He should feel something, even if it was just a fraction of what she'd endured. "I know," he said simply. "I know it doesn't fix anything." A knock interrupted them. Dr. Patricia Wilson entered, tablet in hand, her expression professionally neutral despite the tension thick enough to cut with a scalpel. "Miss Steele, good to see you awake. I'm Dr. Wilson. You gave everyone quite a scare." She glanced at Lincoln, then back to Anastasia. "Should I come back?" "No," Anastasia said quickly. "Please, what happened to me?" Dr. Wilson pulled up Anastasia's chart on her tablet. "Severe exhaustion combined with dehydration. Your blood work shows you've been running on empty for weeks, possibly months. When was the last time you had a full day off? Anastasia couldn't remember. Between her two jobs, Iris's school activities, and keeping their small apartment running, days off were luxury items she couldn't afford. Your body essentially forced a shutdown, Dr. Wilson continued. This isn't negotiable, Miss Steele. You need rest, real rest. At least a week off work, proper nutrition, 8 hours of sleep minimum. Your body won't tolerate anything less right now. I can't take a week off. I have responsibilities. Mom? Iris stirred, rubbing her eyes. When she saw Anastasia awake, she launched herself forward, wrapping her small arms around her mother's neck. You're okay. The man on the phone said you would be okay. Anastasia's eyes found Lincoln again over her daughter's head. Iris followed her gaze, studying Lincoln with the unfiltered curiosity only children possessed. Are you the phone man? Iris asked. I am, Lincoln confirmed softly. Thank you for helping my mummy. Then, with that startling directness children specialized in, she added, Are you my daddy? The room went silent, except for the heart monitor's persistent beeping. Anastasia felt the blood drain from her face. Lincoln's expression crumbled for just a moment before he rebuilt his composure. No, sweetheart, Anastasia managed. He's someone Mummy knew a long time ago. Dr. Wilson cleared her throat. I'll give you all some privacy. Miss Steele, think about what I said. Your daughter needs you to be healthy. She exited, pulling the door closed with a soft click. Iris settled back against Anastasia's side, apparently satisfied with the non-answer. Within minutes, she was asleep again, the stress of the evening finally catching up with her small body. You can help without being in our life, Anastasia said quietly, not wanting to wake Iris. If you feel guilty, donate to a charity, set up a scholarship, but we don't need you coming back and disrupting everything I've built. Lincoln leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying his clasped hands. I understand. I'm not asking to be in your life. But when I heard her voice on that phone, I heard your address. He looked up, and she saw something raw in his expression. I came anyway, not because I thought I had the right, but because I couldn't not come. The words hung between them, weighted with everything unsaid. Anastasia closed her eyes, and suddenly she was 23 again, meeting Lincoln in that Wall Street elevator when she was delivering lunch orders to make ends meet during her last semester of college. He'd been wearing a $10,000 suit. She'd been in jeans and sneakers, carrying Thai food that was making the entire elevator smell like pad Thai. 4th floor, she'd said. That's my floor too, he'd replied. And when she'd looked up, their eyes had met, and something had shifted in the universe. 6 months later, they were walking along the Hudson at sunset, her hand in his, talking about everything and nothing. He'd told her about growing up with the weight of an empire on his shoulders. She'd told her about growing up with nothing but dreams and determination. They'd fit together like puzzle pieces from different boxes that somehow made a better picture together. 8 months after that, her pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, and she'd stared at it for 20 minutes before calling him. He'd been in a board meeting. She could hear the voices in the background when he answered. Can you talk? She'd asked. Always for you, he'd said, stepping out. What's wrong? I'm pregnant. The silence had stretched across cellular waves and city blocks. Then his father's name had appeared on his boardroom phone's screen, the one he'd left behind, and somehow she'd known what would come next. We can't do this, he'd said 3 days later, standing in her studio apartment, not meeting her eyes. My family, the company. This isn't the plan. Plans change, she'd said. Not mine, he replied, and walked out. She'd returned to Cedar Ridge the next week, her engagement ring sold, her dreams reconfigured, her heart locked away where it couldn't be broken again. Now, 7 years later, here they sat in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and regret. Your father? Anastasia asked, because she had to know. Is he still pulling your strings? He died 2 years ago, Lincoln said quietly. Heart attack at his desk. Very much. I'm sorry. And she was, in that complicated way you could be sorry for someone. Else's loss, even when the person who died had destroyed your life. Don't be. He lived exactly as he wanted, controlled everything until his last breath. Lincoln's laugh was bitter. Left me everything. The company, the fortune, the legacy. All the chains are made of gold. And now, you're free? Now I'm exactly what he wanted me to be. Alone at the top, married to the company, no messy emotions to interfere with profit margins. He looked at Iris, sleeping peacefully. Except, I know what I missed. I know what I chose instead. If your ex abandoned you but saved you today, do you let him explain or shut the door? Anastasia wanted to hate him. It would be so much easier if she could maintain that clean, sharp anger that had kept her moving forward all these years. But seeing him here, wrinkled and human and full of regret, holding daisies, like an apology he didn't know how to speak, it complicated things. You should go, she said finally. Thank you for helping Iris, for calling the ambulance. But you should go. Lincoln stood slowly, straightening his wrinkled suit jacket. The hospital bill is covered. Don't argue. It's done. And there's a meal service that will deliver 3 meals a day for the next month. The apartment super has been paid to handle any maintenance issues. It's not charity. It's what I should have done 7 years ago. Lincoln, I'm not trying to buy my way back in, Anastasia. I'm just trying to make sure you can rest. Like the doctor said. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, she's perfect. You did an amazing job. Then he was gone, leaving only the daisies as evidence he'd been there at all. Anastasia stared at them, remembering another bouquet 7 years ago. When everything had been possible, and nothing had been complicated. The heart monitor gradually returned to its normal rhythm. Iris shifted in her sleep, murmuring something about pancakes. Outside the window, New York City continued its relentless pace, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in hospital rooms. Trust versus self-protection. Iris's emotional safety, Anastasia's health. These were the stakes now, the careful balance she had to maintain. Whatever Lincoln Gray wanted, whatever guilt drove him, she couldn't let him upset the life she'd built from the ashes he'd left behind. But the daisies sat there, cheerfully defiant, reminding her that he'd remembered her favorite flower after all this time. 3 days after the hospital, Anastasia sat in Corner Coffee, the local shop where the barista knew everyone's order and the walls displayed terrible art from local high schoolers. She'd chosen this place deliberately, her territory, her comfort zone. Lincoln looked absurdly out of place in his tailored suit, sitting on a wobbly chair that probably cost less than his watch. I want to meet her properly, Lincoln said without preamble. On your terms. Whatever conditions you set. Anastasia had prepared for this, had written her requirements on a napkin at 2 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. She pulled it out now, smoothed it on the scratched wooden table between them. Supervised visits only. I'm there every second. Of course, no media. No PR team spinning this into some redemption story for your corporate image. No photographers, no press releases. Nothing that turns my daughter into a headline. Agreed. No promises you can't keep. You don't tell her you'll be there for her birthday unless you will be. You don't say, see you next week, unless next week is guaranteed. Don't make her love you and then disappear when it gets inconvenient. Lincoln's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Understood. No expensive gifts. No ponies. No trips to Disney World. No trying to buy her affection with things I can't provide. Reasonable. No bringing your corporate team, your lawyers, your assistants. This isn't a business deal. You come alone. Yes. No telling her you're her father unless I decide it's right. For now, you're just Lincoln, Mommy's old friend. I accept that. Anastasia had expected negotiation, pushback, or at least some attempt to modify her terms. His complete acquiescence threw her off balance. That's it? No counter-proposals? No lawyers to review? Lincoln leaned back in the creaky chair. You know what I do when I acquire a company, Anastasia. I have studied it for months. Learn everything, its strengths, weaknesses, what makes it valuable. I've had 7 years to study my mistakes. I know I have no leverage here, no right to demand anything. These aren't terms to negotiate. They're gifts you're offering, and I'm grateful for every single one. The first visit was scheduled for Saturday at Riverside Park, the small one with the faded playground equipment and the sandbox that had seen better decades. Anastasia arrived early with Iris, who was wearing her favorite purple tutu over jeans because she insisted it made her run faster. Lincoln appeared at exactly 10 a.m., and Anastasia almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the suit, replaced by jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He looked nervous, carrying a small backpack that seemed to perplex him like he'd never worn one before. "Mr. Phone Man," Iris shouted, running over before Anastasia could stop her. "Hi, Iris," Lincoln said, crouching to her level. "You can call me Lincoln." "Lincoln." Iris tested the name. "Want to see me on the swings? I can go super high." What followed was perhaps the most awkward and endearing hour Anastasia had ever witnessed. Lincoln, who commanded boardrooms and orchestrated million-dollar deals, stood behind a swing looking completely lost. "Push me," Iris demanded. Lincoln placed his hands carefully on the swing and gave a tentative push. "Higher!" He pushed harder, too hard, and Iris shrieked with delight as she soared. "You're strong." "Sorry, Don't apologize." Again. Slowly, Lincoln found a rhythm. Push, release, catch the swing's natural momentum. Iris's laughter rang across the park, pure and unself-conscious. In slow motion, Anastasia watched Lincoln's face transform. The corporate mask cracking, something vulnerable and amazed taking its place. His eyes tracked Iris's arc through the air like she was defying physics itself. After swinging, Lincoln reached into his backpack, pulling out 2 small items. Not toys from FAO Schwartz or electronic gadgets, but a field guide to trees and a piece of string. "I thought maybe we could identify the trees in the park," he said uncertainly. "And this string, my grandmother taught me cat's cradle when I was your age." Iris was enchanted. They spent 20 minutes with the book, Lincoln reading the descriptions while Iris collected leaves to match the pictures. Then came the string. Lincoln's fingers, so confident with contracts and keyboards, fumbled with the simple patterns. Iris giggled as he tangled himself repeatedly, finally managing a basic cup and saucer formation that immediately collapsed. "You're not very good at this," Iris observed, with 6-year-old honesty. "No," Lincoln agreed. "I'm terrible at it." "That's okay. Do you know how to braid?" Lincoln looked at Iris's long, dark hair, currently escaping from the ponytail Anastasia had attempted that morning. "I can try." What followed was perhaps the worst braid in human history. Lincoln divided Iris's hair into 3 sections, then proceeded to create something that looked less like a braid and more like a hair sculpture made by someone wearing mittens. Iris reached back to feel it and burst into giggles. "It's bumpy." "Very bumpy," Lincoln agreed, his own mouth twitching with suppressed laughter. "I love it. Mummy, look at my bumpy braid." Anastasia couldn't help but smile. "It's very unique." The scene split in her mind. This sunny park with its chipped paint and weeds growing through the sidewalk cracks versus the boardroom where Lincoln usually spent his Saturdays, all glass and chrome and serious faces discussing market projections. 2 worlds that shouldn't intersect, yet here they were, colliding in the form of a terrible braid and genuine laughter. Are those terms fair or too strict? Why? The question hung in the air as Anastasia watched Lincoln attempt to fix the braid, making it somehow worse. Iris didn't care. She was explaining her theory about why clouds looked like cotton candy, and Lincoln was listening with complete attention, as if she was revealing the secrets of the universe. Boundaries are how love learns a shape. The thought came unbidden as the morning ended, as Lincoln said goodbye with a simple wave as he walked away without demanding more than he'd been given. These rules weren't walls to keep him out. They were guidelines to let him in safely, carefully, without destroying what Anastasia had built. "Can Lincoln come again?" Iris asked as they walked home. Anastasia looked back once to see Lincoln still standing by his car, watching them go. "We'll see, baby. We'll see." Saturday mornings became their rhythm. Not grand gestures or elaborate plans, just Lincoln showing up at 10 a.m. sharp, with something simple in his backpack. This week, it was a wooden birdhouse kit from the hardware store, the kind that cost $12 and required more patience than skill. "We're going to paint it rainbow," Iris announced, spreading newspaper on the picnic table while Lincoln read the instructions with the concentration of someone decoding nuclear launch codes. "Tab A into slot B," he muttered, holding two identical-looking pieces of wood. "You're holding them upside down," Anastasia pointed out, trying not to smile at how seriously he was taking this. 3 hours later, they had something that vaguely resembled a birdhouse, painted in stripes that bled into each other because Iris hadn't waited for them to dry. Lincoln had purple paint in his hair, Iris had green on her nose, and Anastasia found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. The next Saturday, Lincoln brought a rock. "It looks like Texas," Iris exclaimed, turning it over in her small hands. "I thought so too," Lincoln said. "Found it walking to work. Keep it in my office all week thinking you might like it." The image of Lincoln Gray, Billionaire CEO, keeping a random rock on his executive desk because it might make a 6-year-old smile did something to Anastasia's carefully maintained defenses. Later, over lunch, he taught Iris his grandmother's trick for hiding peas in rice, so they became treasure hunts instead of vegetables. Such a small thing, but Iris ate every pea on her plate, hunting for them like green gems. "How did your grandmother know that trick?" Iris asked. "She raised 5 boys who all hated vegetables," Lincoln said. "She had to get creative. Tell me more about her." And he did, stories Anastasia had never heard in all their time together before. About a woman who came from Korea with nothing, who built a restaurant from scratch, who taught her grandson to fold dumplings before he could write his name. This Lincoln, the one with family stories and paint in his hair, was someone new. Or maybe someone who'd always existed underneath the suits and expectations. The bakery nights started by accident. Anastasia had mentioned taking extra shifts at Rosalie's, and Lincoln had asked if he could help. She'd meant to say no, but Rosalie had overheard and immediately put him to work. "You have hands you can knead," Rosalie declared, tying an apron around him that said, "Kitchen Goddess," in faded letters. They worked side by side in the warm kitchen, the radio playing softly, their hands covered in flour. There was something about the repetitive motion of kneading dough, the necessity of focus, that made conversation both easier and unnecessary. Sometimes they talked, about Iris's school, about the bakery's history, about nothing important. Sometimes they just worked in comfortable silence, rolling out pie crusts and shaping dinner rolls. "Your hands, remember," Lincoln said one night, watching her shape croissants without looking at the dough. "7 years of practice," she replied, then realized what she'd said. 7 years, the exact amount of time since he'd left. He didn't flinch or look away. "You've built something good here." I know. He focused on his own dough, which looked more like a geography project than future bread. "I'm glad you did." Time lapse, the dough rising in the warm corner of the kitchen, expanding slowly, inevitably. Cut to sunrise over Cedar Ridge, the sky painted in the same warm golds as fresh-baked bread. Rosalie watched them from her perch by the register, her 70 years of wisdom reading stories in their body language. She cornered Anastasia during a break, while Lincoln was out back bringing in more flour. "That boy is trying," Rosalie said simply. "I know. You're fighting it. I know that too. Good. Fight it until you don't need to anymore." But notice when that moment comes, Anastasia wrestled with gratitude and anger in equal measure. Grateful that Lincoln was showing up, that Iris was blooming under the attention, that he never pushed for more than she offered. Angry that it had taken 7 years, that she'd had to nearly collapse for him to appear, that his presence now made her remember how much she'd lost. When is consistency enough to start trusting again? The answer came in pieces. In how Lincoln started texting before each visit to confirm, never assuming his welcome. in how he asked permission before helping Iris with anything. Is it okay if I teach her to tie her shoes the way my grandmother taught me? In how he brought nothing that shined or beeped or cost more than $20. One evening, Iris fell asleep on the bakery's break room couch while they finished the morning's prep. Lincoln carefully covered her with his jacket, then returned to shaping roles as if he hadn't just performed an act of tenderness that made Anastasia's chest ache. She kicks in her sleep, Anastasia warned. I noticed. She got me in the shin at the park last week when she dozed off. You didn't move. Why would I move? He looked genuinely puzzled. She was comfortable. Love is what you do daily. The words appeared on screen like a truth too simple to argue with. If the slow burn growth has you hooked, hit like and subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for more heart-gripping billionaire romances. Saturday after Saturday, small acts accumulated like snowflakes, each one insignificant alone, but together forming something substantial. Lincoln learned to braid marginally better. Iris started setting aside Lincoln rocks she found during the week. Anastasia stopped tensing every time he arrived, stopped checking the clock to see when he'd leave. He modeled humility in ways that surprised her. When Iris's teacher mentioned she was struggling with math, Lincoln didn't hire a tutor or buy educational software. He asked Anastasia, would it be helpful if I worked with her on Saturdays? I was good at math as a kid. Not, I'll fix this, or let me handle it. Just an offer, presented like a question, with room for no. She'd like that, Anastasia admitted. So math became part of Saturdays too. Lincoln using pennies and cookies to make numbers tangible, celebrating small victories like they were moon landings. Fatherhood and love are 1,000 small, repeatable choices. Lincoln was making them, one Saturday at a time, one burnt loaf of bread at a time, one terrible braid at a time. He was choosing them, even when Iris was cranky, even when Anastasia was distant, even when his presence raised more questions than it answered. Why do you keep coming back? Anastasia asked one night, exhausted from a 12-hour shift, watching him meticulously clean the mixer she'd been too tired to face. He paused, hands soapy, considering. Because every Saturday, I get to choose better than I chose before. And maybe if I choose right enough times, it starts to balance out the times I chose wrong. That's not how math works. No, he agreed. But maybe it's how forgiveness works. Eventually, the dough continued rising in the corner, patient and inevitable. Outside, Cedar Ridge slept, unaware of the small redemptions taking place in a bakery kitchen, measured in flour and time, and the space between two people learning to exist in the same room again. The conversation happened on the old bleachers behind Cedar Ridge Elementary, where they'd started bringing soup in thermoses every Tuesday while Iris had her after-school art class. October wind cut through their jackets, but the soup was warm, and they'd fallen into this routine. Without planning it, just two adults learning to exist in the margins of a child's schedule. I built a fortress, Lincoln said suddenly, staring at the empty soccer field. That's what my therapist calls it. Spent my whole life building walls to keep my father out, to keep his expectations from suffocating me. But somewhere along the way, the fortress became a cage, and I was the one who locked it from the inside. Anastasia wrapped her hands around her thermos, letting the heat seep into her palms. When did you start therapy? 2 years ago. After my father died, I stood at his funeral, watching them lower this man who controlled every breath I took for 35 years, and I realized I didn't know how to breathe without his disapproval shaping my lungs. He laughed, but it wasn't bitter anymore, just tired. Paid a fortune to learn what you probably always knew, that choosing fear over love is the fastest way to die while you're still breathing. The street noise faded to a distant hum, like the world had turned down its volume to give them this moment. You're unlearning, Anastasia observed, every day. Unlearning that love is weakness, that needing people is dangerous, that showing up is less important than showing profit. He turned to look at her directly. I'm unlearning that walking away is easier than staying when things get complicated. You can't make up the beginning, Anastasia said carefully, words she'd rehearsed in her mind 100 times. You can't give me back the nights I spent alone in the hospital when she was born. You can't undo the first words, first steps, first day of school. The beginning is gone, Lincoln. You can only make the middle worth staying for. I know. His voice was rough. I'm trying to make the middle count. They sat in silence, soup cooling between them. Somewhere, a dog barked. A car door slammed. Life continued its ordinary course, while two people navigated the extraordinary task of rebuilding from ruins. Tell me about the therapy, Anastasia said finally. So he did. About the panic attacks that started after his father's death, how he'd collapsed in his office one day, convinced he was dying. About learning to identify feelings beyond fine and busy. About discovering that his entire life had been a performance for an audience of one who was no longer watching. My therapist asked me to write down what I wanted, Lincoln said. Not what I should want. Not what would look good in a biography. Just what I wanted. It took me 3 sessions to write 1 sentence. What did you write? To know my daughter. To deserve forgiveness I haven't earned. To stop being afraid of the only thing that ever made me feel real. Which was, he looked at her. You, a flash of memory. Her tiny studio apartment 7 years ago. The chipped teacup she'd been holding when she told him about the pregnancy. How her hands had shaken. How the tea had gone cold while they stared at each other across an impossible distance. Then back to now, older, scarred, but somehow still here. They created new traditions without calling them that. Soup on bleachers became a Tuesday constant. Thursday nights, when Anastasia worked late at the bakery, Lincoln would read to Iris over video call, 2 blankets, 2 copies of the same book, making a bridge across the city. Sunday mornings, he'd bring coffee to the park, the good kind from the place that roasted their own beans, and they'd watch Iris convince other kids to hunt for rocks that looked like states. She has your stubborn streak, Lincoln said one Sunday, watching Iris argue, passionately that a rock definitely looked like Florida if you squinted. She has your focus, Anastasia countered, noting how Iris could spend an hour on a single drawing, perfecting every detail. Poor kid. Lucky kid. She got the best of both of us. The words hung there, an acknowledgement of what they'd made together, even if they'd been apart for most of it. First kiss now, red flag or honest growth. It happened in November, after Iris's school play where she'd played tree number 3 with intense commitment. They'd walked her home, sugar-crashed from the bake sale, and tucked her into bed together, a choreography they'd developed. Without words, Lincoln reading while Anastasia fixed blankets, both kissing her forehead before turning out the light. On Anastasia's front stoop, Lincoln turned to leave, then stopped. Anastasia, she knew what was coming, had felt it building for weeks, in the way their hands almost touched when passing dishes, in the way his eyes found hers across rooms, in the way her body leaned toward him without permission. We can't go backward, she said. I don't want to go backward. I want to go forward. Differently. Better. Lincoln. I know I have no right to ask. I know trust takes years to rebuild. I know you and Iris have a whole life that works without me. But I also know that Tuesday soup tastes better when you're there. That Iris's laugh makes every broken thing in me feel less sharp. Watching you work in the bakery, building something from nothing every night. Makes me want to be someone who builds instead of someone who acquires. The kiss was nothing like their old kisses. Those had been hungry, desperate, trying to consume enough to last through separation. This was soft, intentional, a question more than a statement. Adult in its restraint, precious in its care. His hand cupped her face like she was made of spun glass, and she leaned into it, letting herself want this for just a moment. When they pulled apart, Anastasia's eyes were wet. We keep this from Iris, she said, until we know what it is, until we're sure it won't hurt her. Yes. And we go slow. Slower than slow. Yes. And if you run again, I won't. He said it with the certainty of someone who'd spent 2 years in therapy learning why he ran in the first place. I know what I lost, Anastasia. I won't lose it twice. Apologies mean change. Intimacy follows accountability. She watched him walk to his car, this man who was learning to be different from the one who'd left. In the window above, Iris slept peacefully, unaware that the adults in her life were cautiously, trying to build something new from the pieces of something broken. The street noise returned to full volume. Life resumed its pace. But something had shifted on that front stoop, something small and fragile and worth protecting. Anastasia went inside and locked the door, her lips still warm from possibility. The article appeared on a Thursday morning, published by Business Insider at 6:47 a.m. Anastasia saw it because her co-worker Maria had forwarded it with 3 exclamation points and a shocked face emoji. Is the CEO of Grey Enterprises hiding a secret family in Queens? The photo was blurred but recognizable. Lincoln at Riverside Park, pushing. Iris on the swing. Anastasia visible in the background on a bench. The article was mostly speculation, careful to avoid libel, but the implication was clear. Billionaire bachelor, mystery woman, secret child, the internet's favorite scandal cocktail. Anastasia's hands shook as she scrolled through the comments. Most were curious, some were cruel. A few enterprising amateur detectives were already trying to identify the park, the woman, the child. Someone had posted a zoomed-in screenshot trying to make out Iris's face, her daughter's face, on the internet. Without permission, without protection, she called Lincoln immediately. He answered on the first ring. I saw it, he said before she could speak. I'm handling it. How did this happen? I don't know yet. But I will find out. Lincoln, they're trying to identify her. People are... Her voice cracked. She's 6 years old. I know. Anastasia, I swear to you, I will fix this. An hour later, Lincoln's PR team was assembled in the Manhattan conference room, laptops open, strategies forming. Jennifer Davis, his head of communications, had already drafted 3 different responses. Option 1, Jennifer said, pulling up her presentation. We confirm the relationship, control the narrative. Exclusive interview with a friendly outlet, maybe Vanity Fair. You, the reformed bachelor, embracing fatherhood. It's a redemption arc. Investors will eat it up. No. Option 2, we deny everything. The photo is misleading, you were volunteering at a community program, the child is not yours. We can have the article retracted for lack of evidence. Absolutely not. Option 3, we stay silent but leak strategic information to soften the story. Paint you as a devoted father who's been quietly involved all along. Turn you into a sympathetic figure. Lincoln closed the laptop. The sound echoed in the silence. Option 4, he said quietly. No photos, no questions, no comment. We say nothing, we confirm nothing, and we make it clear that this topic is permanently off the table. Jennifer looked at him like he'd suggested setting fire to the building. Lincoln, silence creates a vacuum. The media will fill it with speculation. Your board will demand answers. Investors will wonder what you're hiding. Let them wonder. This could affect stock prices. Then they'll go down. You're putting your personal life ahead of shareholder interests. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. The camera shutter sound effects filled the air. Click, 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 then a hard cut. To silence as Lincoln closed the conference room door, leaving his team outside. On-screen text, accountability looks like no. But saying no to his team was the easy part. The hard part was Anastasia. She met him at Corner Coffee again, but this time there was no warmth in her expression. She sat with her arms crossed, every line of her body screaming defense. I need you to pause visits, she said, without preamble. Lincoln felt the words like a physical blow. Anastasia, until you lock down the leaks, until you can guarantee that my daughter won't end up on a tabloid cover, until you prove that being in your world doesn't mean giving up her privacy, we need to pause. I understand. Do you? Because I've spent 7 years building a quiet, safe life for her. And in 3 months, you've brought attention we can't control. People are trying to identify her school, Lincoln. Her school. I know. And I'm fixing it. How? By throwing money at it. By having lawyers send threatening letters. That doesn't make the internet forget. It doesn't make those photos disappear. Should he go public to control the narrative, or keep quiet to protect the child? Lincoln leaned forward, needing her to see the truth in his eyes. I told my PR team no to all of it. No interviews, no strategic leaks, no redemption narrative. I told my board the same thing this morning when they demanded I address it in our quarterly call. And 2 board members have called for a vote of no confidence. My general counsel says I'm violating my fiduciary duty by not managing the PR crisis. My stock is down 4% since the article was posted. Anastasia's expression didn't soften. That's not enough. That's just you making choices that benefit you in the long run. Silence protects your image too. You're right. He pulled out his phone, showed her an email draft. So I'm doing more. She read it slowly. It was addressed to every major news outlet, every gossip blog, every media contact his company maintained. Any publication that prints identifiable photos of or personal information about the minor child referenced in recent speculation will face immediate legal action and permanent loss of access to Grey Enterprises, its executives, and all subsidiary companies. This is non-negotiable and permanent. The child's privacy is not a commodity for sale. I'm also hiring a firm that specializes in scrubbing information, Lincoln continued. They'll work to remove the existing photos and send cease and desist letters to anyone who reposts them. And I'm implementing a new policy. Anyone on my staff who leaks information about my personal life will be terminated immediately. No exceptions. Who took the photo? I don't know yet. Could have been anyone with a phone at the park. Could have been someone following me. I'm trying to find out. And when you do, legal action if possible. But mostly, I make sure it doesn't happen again. Anastasia stared at the email, then at him. This will hurt your business. Yes, your investors will be angry. Already are. Your board might actually vote you out. They might. I have enough shares to block it, but it'll be ugly. He met her eyes. I don't care. 7 years ago I chose the company over you. I'm not making that mistake again. If protecting privacy over PR matters to you, tap like and share this story with someone who values integrity over image. Don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories. Anastasia was quiet for a long time, processing. Lincoln waited, learning that sometimes love meant sitting in uncomfortable silence, not filling it with promises or explanations. How long? Until the media loses interest? She asked finally. My team says a week if we starve them of content. Maybe 2. I stay away from Cedar Ridge during that time. I don't appear in public. With you or Iris, I give them nothing to photograph or speculate about. And the pause? I'll respect it for as long as you need. A week, a month, a year. I'm fixing this, Anastasia, and I'll earn back what I lost. I won't beg. I won't push. I won't make this your problem to manage. She nodded slowly. Iris will ask where you are. Tell her I'm traveling for work. It's not a lie. I have the Tokyo meetings I've been postponing. She'll be disappointed. I know. That kills me. But her safety matters more than her disappointment. And your trust matters more than anything. Lincoln pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. This is a detailed plan. The legal firm I hired, the new staff policies, the media strategy, or lack thereof. The timeline for when things should calm down. I'm not asking you to take it on faith. I'm showing you the work. Anastasia opened the folder, scanned the documents. It was thorough, more thorough than she'd expected. Concrete steps with concrete timelines. Accountability in black and white. You really told your board no? I really did. They meet again next week. It's going to be a fight. You could lose. I could. He smiled, but it was tiring. You know what my therapist said when I told her? She said, finally, you're choosing people over profit. That's growth. Money can't buy trust. Boundaries and humility build it. The news headline overlay flashed across the screen, camera shutters creating a cacophony of invasive sound. Then, hard cut to silence. A closed office door. Lincoln on one side, his PR team on the other, his choice made clear. Anastasia closed the folder. 2 weeks. I need 2 weeks to see if this dies down, to make sure Iris stays safe. You have it. And Lincoln? If there's another leak, if someone gets a photo of her face, if this escalates, then I'll step back permanently. I won't let my world destroy hers. She studied him, this man who was choosing the hard path when easier ones were available, who was risking his career, his board's confidence, his public image to protect a child he barely knew. The old Lincoln would have calculated the PR benefit, would have found the angle that served everyone. This Lincoln was just trying to do right, even when right was costly. Okay, she said finally. 2 weeks. Lincoln stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I told Iris I'd teach her to make paper airplanes this Saturday. Would it be okay if I sent her a video showing her how, so she can practice until I'm back? The request was so small, so thoughtful, so aware of boundaries while still trying to maintain connection. Anastasia felt her carefully maintained walls crack just slightly. Yes, she'd like that. Thank you. He left without touching her, without asking for reassurance, without making his discomfort her responsibility. Through the coffee shop window, Anastasia watched him get into his car. Not the Bentley today, but something modest, something that didn't scream for attention. Her phone buzzed. Maria again, girl. Is that really Lincoln Gray? The Lincoln Gray? Anastasia deleted the message without responding. Some things weren't for public consumption. Some stories didn't need an audience. Some choices mattered precisely because they happened in private, away from cameras and commentary. 2 weeks. She'd give him 2 weeks to prove that silence could be louder than spin, that boundaries mattered. More than brand management, that protecting Iris was worth more than controlling the narrative. The article was still online, still gathering comments and speculation. But Lincoln had drawn a line in the sand, this far, no further. Not for money, not for image, not for anything. Now they'd see if the line held. The 2 weeks passed slowly. The media attention peaked on day 3. A celebrity gossip show spent 8 minutes speculating about Lincoln's mystery family, then gradually faded when Lincoln gave them nothing to feed on. No sightings, no confirmations, no strategic photo ops. By day 14, a Hollywood divorce had replaced him in the news cycle, and the internet's attention moved on like it always did, chasing fresher scandal. Lincoln sent a video to Iris on Saturday as promised, him in a Tokyo hotel room, teaching her to fold paper airplanes, his tie loosened and exhaustion visible around his eyes. Iris watched it 17 times, practicing until she could make one that flew across the entire living room. When is Lincoln coming back? She asked every few days. Soon, baby, Anastasia said, and hoped it was true. On day 15, Lincoln called. The story's dead. No new articles in a week. The photos have been removed from most sites. My legal team is monitoring. Can I come back? Anastasia had been waiting for this call, rehearsing her answer. Iris has her dance recital in 2 weeks. Saturday, December 10th, 2 p.m. I'll be there. Lincoln, you should know, your assistant already called the school to ask about security protocols. That's not necessary. It's a small community theater, folding chairs and proud grandparents. Don't make it bigger than it is. I wasn't trying to. I know. But small is what we do here. Small is safe. Understood. Just me, folding chair, proud, whatever I am. The calendar clash revealed itself 8 days before the recital. Lincoln's assistant called Anastasia directly, something that had never happened before. Miss Steele, I apologize for the intrusion, but I need you to understand the situation. Rebecca Morgan spoke with efficient professionalism. Mr. Gray has an investor summit scheduled for December 10th. It's been on the books for 9 months. 7 international investors flew in specifically to meet with him. If he cancels, we risk losing a $200 million partnership. Then he should go to his meeting, Anastasia said simply. He's refusing. He won't even discuss alternatives. But I thought perhaps you could... Could what? Tell him his job matters more than a dance recital. I spent 7 years believing that was true. I'm not going to say it now. Ms. Steele, I don't think you understand the financial implications. I understand that he has a choice. Same choice he's always had. I'm not going to make it for him. She hung up before Rebecca could respond. That evening, Lincoln called. My assistant overstepped. I'm sorry. She's worried about you. She's worried about the company. There's a difference. He paused. I'm not going to the summit, Anastasia. I already told them. Lincoln, $200 million is less important than a 6-year-old girl in a purple tutu dancing to music from Frozen. The investors can reschedule or they can walk. Either way, I'll be in a folding chair on December 10th. Your board will be furious. They're already furious. What's one more thing? Do small, consistent choices matter more than a grand, flashy gesture? December 10th arrived cold and clear. The Cedar Ridge Community Theatre was exactly as Anastasia had described, small, worn at the edges, the kind of place where the curtain sometimes stuck and the sound system crackled. Parents crowded into folding chairs, phones ready, nervous energy filling the air as young dancers prepared backstage. Lincoln arrived 30 minutes early, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of a suit. No driver, no security, no assistant hovering. Just him, carrying a bouquet of daisies that looked humble against the elaborate rose arrangements other parents had brought. He found Anastasia in the 3rd row, saved him a seat without comment. They sat in companionable silence while the theatre filled, watching parents fuss over programs and grandparents claim aisle seats for better photos. Lincoln's phone buzzed. The screen lit up, board call incoming. Anastasia watched him glance at it, then deliberately flip it face down on his lap. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. He turned it off completely and slid it into his pocket. They'll keep calling, Anastasia said quietly. Let them. The lights dimmed. The recital began with the youngest group, 4-year-olds in bumblebee costumes who mostly wandered in circles while their teacher tried to guide them from the wings. The audience laughed with delight, cameras flashing despite the no-flash photography signs. Iris's group was 4th. Magic of Winter performed to a medley that started with Let It Go and ended with Do You Want to Build a Snowman? The choreography was simple, the execution enthusiastic if not precise. Iris was 3rd from the left, her snowflake crown slightly askew, her movements a half-beat behind the music, but full of complete commitment. Lincoln's breath caught when she appeared on stage. Anastasia glanced at him and saw his eyes had gone glassy, his jaw tight with the effort of not breaking down entirely. When Iris executed a wobbly pirouette and nearly crashed into another dancer, he smiled so wide it looked painful. The camera slowly pushed in on Anastasia's expression as she watched him watch their daughter. Something in her face softened, like ice meeting sun, a gradual thaw too subtle to pinpoint but impossible to miss. When Iris took her bow, individually, because she'd been chosen for a small, solo part, Lincoln stood without thinking, applauding until his palms stung. Other parents joined him, a standing ovation for their children's earnest performance, and Iris beamed like she'd just danced at Lincoln Center. Backstage afterward, Iris launched herself at Lincoln, still in her costume, crown now completely sideways. Did you see me? Did you see my pirouette? I saw everything. You were magnificent. I messed up in the middle part. I didn't notice. I was too busy being amazed. Anastasia watched them. This tall man in jeans crouching to 6-year-old height, listening to Iris's excited recap with complete attention. No checking his phone, no distracted nods, no looking around to see who might be watching. Just presence. Full, undivided, chosen. Other parents congratulated Iris, admired her crown and took photos. Lincoln stayed in the background, careful not to dominate, aware he was a guest in this community. When one grandmother asked who he was, Iris answered before Anastasia could. "That's Lincoln. He's teaching me math and how to make paper airplanes, and he can't braid hair at all, but he tries really hard." The grandmother smiled. "Sounds like a keeper." Outside, in the parking lot, parents dispersed with promises of ice cream and pizza. Iris ran ahead to show her crown to another dancer. Anastasia and Lincoln stood by his car, the modest sedan he'd been driving lately. Nothing that attracted attention. "Thank you for coming," Anastasia said. "Thank you for letting me. Your investors rescheduled for January, and if they hadn't, that would have been fine too. There will always be another deal, another meeting, another crisis that supposedly only I can handle. But there's only one first dance recital. Real grand gestures are quiet and repeated. Presence over performance." Anastasia looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd turned off his phone during a board crisis to watch a community theater recital, who'd flown back from Tokyo to teach paper airplane folds over video, who'd taken a financial hit and board rebellion to protect a child's privacy, who showed up again and again in folding chairs and park benches with daisies instead of diamonds. "I'm not ready to call this a family," she said carefully. "I'm not ready to tell Iris you're her father. I'm not ready to explain to people what we are or promise we'll work out. Okay. But this," she gestured between them, at Iris playing in the distance, at the life they were carefully constructing from caution and hope. "This is the life I'm choosing. Not because you've erased the past, but because you're building something different in the present." Lincoln's expression did something complicated: relief and gratitude, and awareness that this was a beginning, not an ending. "That's more than I deserve." Probably, but maybe that's how grace works. They stood there as the parking lot emptied, as the winter sun slanted through. Bare trees, as Iris's laughter echoed off the theater's brick walls. Then Anastasia reached up, cupped his face in her cold hands, and kissed him. This kiss was different from the first. That one had been tentative, testing. This was steadier, sure of itself without being certain of the future. Permission to continue, not a finish line. A choice made with open eyes, aware of the risks, willing to try anyway. When they pulled apart, Iris was watching from 10 feet away, her expression curious. "Are you guys gonna get married?" she asked with 6-year-old bluntness. "No immediate plans," Anastasia said, voice impressively steady. "But you like each other. We're figuring that out, baby." "Okay. Can we get ice cream now?" They went for ice cream, a local place with sticky tables and ice cream that came in colors not found in nature. Iris got blue raspberry with gummy bears and talked non-stop about the recital, about how her friend, Emma, had forgotten her entrance, about how the music had been too loud during the finale. Lincoln listened like it was the most important story he'd ever heard. Later, after ice cream, after Iris had returned home exhausted and happy, Lincoln walked Anastasia back to her apartment steps. "I've been thinking," he said, "about working from Cedar Ridge more. Maybe renting a small office space here. I can do most of my work remotely, fly into Manhattan when necessary, be closer, more available." That's a big change. "I'm also implementing a written policy, board-approved, legally binding. No media about my private life. No statements, no photos, no using my personal life for corporate benefit. It's in writing now. Permanent." "You did that?" "Had the lawyers draw it up this week. The board votes on it Tuesday, but I own enough shares that it'll pass whether they like it or not. If this moment hits you, share it with a friend who loves second chance stories. And make sure you're subscribed to Mr. Steele Rich Stories so you never miss these powerful romance journeys." Anastasia sat on her front steps, Lincoln beside her, their breath visible in the December cold. Somewhere above, Iris's bedroom light was on, probably playing instead of sleeping. "I never thought we'd be here," Anastasia admitted. "After you left, I couldn't even envision a version of the future where we existed in the same room without it hurting. Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes, but less. And differently." She looked at him. "You're not the same person who left." "Neither are you." "No. I'm stronger now. Strong enough to say no if this starts to break instead of bend." Strong enough to choose my daughter's well-being over hope that you'll stay. I know. That's why I'm trying to be someone who deserves the yes when you give it. They sat until the cold became uncomfortable, until Anastasia's phone buzzed with Iris calling her upstairs. Lincoln kissed her goodnight on the steps, soft, brief, full of patience. Same time next Saturday, he asked. Same time, she confirmed. He walked to his car, turned back once to wave. Anastasia waved back, then went inside to her daughter, to their small apartment, to the life they'd built that was slowly, carefully, opening to include one more. The grand gesture hadn't been roses or declarations. It had been a folding chair in the third row, a phone turned off, a choice made quietly and repeated until it became a pattern. Presence over performance, every single time. 3 months later, the bakery had found its gentle rhythm with one more person in the mix. Lincoln had rented a small office space above the hardware store on Main Street, close enough to walk to Rosalie's when the evening shifts started. Most nights, he'd show up around 8, tie on the kitchen goddess apron that Rosalie had ordered for him in extra large, and work alongside Anastasia in comfortable silence. Tonight, the radio played softly, some jazz station that crackled between songs. They'd finished the bread orders and were working on tomorrow's pastries, Anastasia shaping croissants with practiced efficiency, Lincoln attempting Danish with less success but more determination than he'd had 3 months ago. "You're getting better," Anastasia observed, watching him fold the dough. "Liar. But I appreciate the encouragement." The bakery was closed, the front lights dimmed, the world outside reduced to occasional headlights passing on the street. In this quiet pocket of time, they existed without performance, without audience, just two people, who'd found their way back to each other through the long route of accountability and time. Anastasia's phone timer went off. The croissants needed to rest. She washed her hands, dried them on her apron, and suddenly Lincoln was there, offering his hand. "Dance with me," he said. "There's no music. There's always music." So they danced in the flour-dusted kitchen, slow and unhurried, her head against his chest, his chin resting on her hair. No witnesses, no cameras, no one to perform for. Just two people choosing each other in the quiet moments that mattered most. "I'm here," Lincoln whispered. "I see you," Anastasia replied. The soft focused steam from their discarded teacups rose in the background, then match cut to dawn over Cedar Ridge Lake, the water catching early light like scattered diamonds. That same week, Lincoln sat at his new desk, modest compared to his Manhattan office, with a view of the hardware store's parking lot instead of the city skyline, and wrote a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual letter with pen and paper, something that felt permanent enough to matter. "Dear Iris, I'm writing this for you to read someday, when you're old enough to understand complicated things. Your mom will keep it safe until then. I want you to know that being your father is teaching me what I should have learned years ago, that humility isn't weakness, it's strength, that time is the only currency that actually matters, that showing up is harder and more important than any business deal I've ever closed. I'm sorry I missed your beginning. I can't fix that, no matter how much I wish I could. But I'm trying to make your middle and your end worth the wait. I'm trying to be someone you can be proud of, not because of what I own or what I've achieved, but because of who I choose to be when it's difficult. Thank you for teaching me how to braid badly, how to identify rocks that look like states, and how to be patient when things don't work the first time, or the 50th time. Love, Verve, Lincoln, and..." He sealed it, wrote Iris's name on the envelope, and gave it to Anastasia that night. "Don't read it," he said. "It's for her. When she's ready." Anastasia held the envelope, feeling its weight. "You could have typed this, sent it digitally so it lasts forever. Some things should be written by hand, more permanent that way, more intentional." She tucked it into her bag, into the folder where she kept important documents. Iris's birth certificate, vaccination records, school photos. The letter fit right in, another piece of their carefully constructed story. At breakfast the next Saturday, Iris was working on a school project about growth mindsets. She'd been assigned to interview someone about learning something new, and she'd chosen Lincoln. "So," Iris said with the seriousness of a tiny journalist, "what did you learn that was hard?" Lincoln considered the question while spreading jam on toast. "I learned that people can change if they're willing to do the work. That saying sorry means nothing if your actions stay the same. That being a good person is a choice you make every day, not something you achieve once and then you're done. Like practicing piano. Exactly like practicing piano. You don't play one good song and then never practice again. You keep showing up." Iris wrote this down in her notebook with intense concentration, tongue sticking out slightly. "Mom says you're learning to be a dad." "I am. It's the hardest thing I've ever learned, and the most important. Are you good at it yet? Getting better? What do you think?" Iris tilted her head, assessing. "You're like a B+, maybe an A- on good days." Lincoln laughed, genuine and warm. "That's fair. I'll keep practicing." They modeled it daily, this lesson about growth and change. Anastasia showed Iris what boundaries looked like by maintaining hers. With Lincoln, saying no when she needed to, saying yes when she could. Lincoln demonstrated accountability by following through on every promise, by admitting when he was wrong, by never making excuses for the past. Late one evening, after Iris was asleep and Lincoln was heading home, to his small Cedar Ridge apartment, Anastasia walked him to the door. "I've been thinking about stories," she said, "about how all our choices become our stories. Every decision, every moment we choose kindness or cruelty, patience or anger, it all writes our narrative." "And," Lincoln asked, "and we're choosing better ink now. All of us. We're writing something worth reading." He kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. "Best collaboration I've ever worked on." After he left, Anastasia stood at her window watching his taillights disappear down the street. 7 years ago, she'd watched him leave and thought it was an ending. Now she knew it had been an intermission, painful and long, but not final. The story continued, not because the past had been erased, but because the present was being built with different materials. Honesty instead of image. Presence instead of promises. Consistency instead of grand gestures. Outside, Cedar Ridge slept. Inside, a mother and daughter dreamed safely. And somewhere between here and Manhattan, a man drove home thinking about piano practice and growth mindsets and the privilege of earning a B+ from a 6-year-old critic. The bakery will open tomorrow. Saturdays would bring parks and terrible braids. Tuesdays would mean soup on bleachers. Life would continue its ordinary rhythm, extraordinary only in its insistence on showing up, on trying, on choosing better. What lesson landed for you? Boundaries, forgiveness, or humility? Comment below and let us know. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for more uplifting stories that remind us love is built in the quiet moments, not the grand gestures. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change how you think about second chances.